leadership requires self-awareness. And am I living to my values? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to live to my values? There are leadership values. Look them up. Do I have these values? What do I need to do to change? With higher levels of trust, there's a lot more openness. People feel comfortable bringing their true, authentic self to the workplace. And if they're not doing that, they're trying to behave like everyone else. And then you have what's called groupthink. Everyone is thinking the same way, everyone is behaving the same way, and creativity cannot come out of that. And I used to say to people, you have 5 minutes to complain, and then we're going to spend 20 minutes on the solution. Okay? And don't come to me and complain unless you have a recommendation. Okay? It's okay to share feelings. It's okay to get it out. You can vent. But as a leader, we want to move to solution. We want to move to how do we change this? How do we make this better?
I am Peter Rillich, business coach. With this podcast series, I will address leadership topics with my guests, how you can relate your personal values and goals to find the best solutions for leadership issues. Today's podcast is about leadership trust. We are going to cover what does it really mean for a leader? What does it mean in the success of an organization? We also will cover proven techniques how to build trust. And we also will talk about probably not really popular topic, what can happen when you lose trust, how you can build it up again if it's necessary or it's possible at all. We also will talk about what self-awareness of a leader means and what role it plays into trust building. I'm really excited about the topic because it looks like really crucial for our organization. And I'm also really excited because I have a really experienced guest today. James Lampasona is a really great leader and has decades of experience in IT, for instance. He worked for AT&T and National Instruments. He occupied HR positions for more than 10 years. He led thousands of people and even smaller organizations. And at the same time, he is also a certified coach, helping people overcome stress and burnout. Thank you very much, James, to joining me and accepting the invitation. And it's a really great topic, what you brought up, actually, the leadership trust. So let me ask my first question, which is, how would you define trust?
Okay, trust is pretty simple, Peter. And that's really having faith and confidence in someone else's abilities, their intentions, and their decisions.
Yeah. And do you have any specifics for leadership trust?
You know, leadership trust is pretty much the same, with two exceptions. So let me back up and tell you about the components of trust, which are reliability. People do what they say they're going to do. Integrity. People behave according to their values. Transparency is a big one. So leaders are sharing what they know to other people. There's competence, and that means that you are able to do what you say you're going to do, and that you do what you're going to do using your skills that you have. Consistency is key. If you're all over the place in your communication and not being consistent so that people are getting the same message each time, that can cause trust to diminish. And then there's two others. There's empathy and vulnerability. Showing empathy to other people allows them to feel that they're valued. And then vulnerability allows people to be vulnerable. If managers aren't vulnerable, people aren't going to reciprocate that. So leadership trust has two additional components, and that is support, that people feel cared for, and also encouraged. And then the second thing is accountability, that leaders are holding themselves and others accountable. That fosters trust. Because when we have leaders that play they're biased towards other people or they have favorites. And those favorites are getting all the support. Other people who aren't getting that support are not going to feel acknowledged, okay, and that they're important. And then the other thing is that mistakes are acknowledged and addressed transparently. So we've all been in situations where mistakes happened and they're just not talked about. And that goes to culture. If mistakes are being talked about transparently and acknowledged, like we made this mistake, that builds a culture of responsibility and integrity. And leaders are really the ones who are the example to everyone else. And leaders that don't walk their talk, employees can say, well, if they're not doing it, I don't need to do it. And then that diminishes trust.
Why do you think leadership trust is really crucial for an organization?
Okay, I knew you were going to ask that question. And I want to use I was reading Harvard Business Review, and there's a great article by Stephen Covey, and the article is The Trust Crisis. And Covey goes on to talk about the key consequences of diminished trust or no trust. So decreased productivity. When employees feel demotivated, disengaged, and hesitant, when employees may feel demotivated, disengaged, they may be hesitant to collaborate with others. Okay. So if there's no trust in the organization or very little trust, and you don't feel that you can talk to other people openly and with confidence, that brings about demotivation. You don't want to be engaged in the work to the degree that you might want to be. Increased conflicts. If there's not trust or low levels of trust, people don't feel safe talking to each other and bringing up the real issues. And without that trust, it becomes challenging to resolve conflicts. And conflicts can bring an organization to a halt because there's sides and people are trying to make a decision, and delayed decisions can impact the bottom line. There's belief that quick, well-made decisions is a competitive advantage because you're getting things out to the market quicker than other organizations. And then there's trust is essential for creating a positive work environment. Without it, it can result in a toxic work culture characterized by fear, suspicion, and low morale. And we're going to talk about fear and suspicion later. And then it just damages relationships. And once trust is no longer in a relationship or it's been diminished, it takes a long time to build that, rebuild that trust.
If I understand correctly, trust is not something like you have or you don't have, but it's a kind of scale. Like
it is
low level, it's low level and high level trust. How would you define the low and the high level trust at the workplace?
I would say low level trust is some of the things I just talked about, where you're building trust here and there, but you're not being consistent.
Yeah,
and that causes a lot of misinformation to be communicated. And then high levels of trust are managers who are demonstrating the characteristics that I talked about a bit ago consistently. They're being empathetic, they're being understanding, they're offering support to employees, and they do it on a consistent basis.
Obviously, the ultimate measure of a success of an organization is how successful the organization itself. But if you want to measure trust, what signs, what measurements can you use to find out where are you on that scale?
So that's a great question. Employee engagement surveys will get to that information and collect that data. I trust my boss. I trust the integrity of the leadership in this organization. I feel comfortable bringing up difficult topics. I feel that I can say what is important without reprimand or repercussions.
Sometimes I hear some ideas around trust and organization culture, and some leaders, not all of them fortunately, but some leaders say, it's a workplace, I don't care. the employees come here for money, for the salary, and that's it. They will get it and do your job, and that's it. I don't care too much about that. What do you think about this type of approach?
If we're talking about the military, people who have to follow orders no matter what, then that works in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
In companies where a lot of companies have stakeholders, that's not going to work because employees are really working on behalf of those stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not getting the support that they need and they're not seeing accountability in their leaders or diminished accountability, there's a lot of disengagement that comes with that. And employees who are disengaged are not performing at a high level, which is what we want people in companies to be doing.
We already talked about a little bit how to measure trust, but I still have some questions.
Sure.
Because a leader don't have the ability, the chance to turn to engagement surveys all the time. Probably you can recommend a couple techniques, tools, what they can use on a daily basis to check the trust level of their employees. What signs they can look for.
And I think that's an easy question. You just ask the person on your team, what do you need for you to have trust in me and in this organization?
Yeah.
And then write it down and then behave that way. If you're able to do that. Some managers have a lot of direct reports, and if everyone's asking for different things, that's not going to be possible. So what's common among those things? And then have transparency and say, this was what is common among what all of you said. Does this work for us? And then move forward in that direction.
It looks like to me that micromanagement is a kind of hot topic today, and it's not in a positive way most of the time. So if I read articles, posts, and whatever in this topic, micromanagement, most of the time they say it's not really effective and it's not really good for anyone, not even the leader, not even the employee. What do you think about what role can micromanagement play in this in building trust?
So micromanagement does not build trust.
Yeah.
Because what the manager is saying to that employee is, you can't be trusted to do it the right way. So I have to hover and make sure you're doing it the right way. And sometimes micromanagement is just do it this way, do it my way, exactly as I tell you. And we're not robots. We bring gifts and skills and talents to the workplace. And, oftentimes if we're being micromanaged, the question comes up, why did you hire me? Yeah. If all I have to do is follow your instructions, why am I here? You could have hired someone at a lower salary to implement that.
Yeah.
And I could have what I want out of my occupation, which is the ability to be creative, the ability to be autonomous where it makes sense, the ability to bring my gifts and my talents, who I truly am, into the workplace. And all of that is diminished when you have a micromanager.
How about if we have a really beginner at the workplace and a person who don't know too much about the process or the job, what they are actually doing, because they are just started to do that? How can you avoid micromanaging that person, and how can you let that type of person to use the creativity and the way how they want to do stuff and not really pushing them to a certain direction?
I think, Peter, what has to happen is the manager needs to be engaged. And not just, you're going to meet with this person and read this and do this, but to sort of connect the dots for the person. And it's working with the more senior folks on your team and saying, I'd like you to mentor this person. And then the leader is checking in, what do you need? How can I support you? I'm going to be transparent with you. Here's how you're doing. You're doing great. Or I'd like to see more of this. And the employee is going to respond to that because that's building trust. And you mentioned, you mentioned a micromanager in that question. So micromanagers are not supporting people. They're not having empathy for how they feel. They're not being transparent. So all of those things diminish trust in the workforce. And that employee may say, I don't want this in my career. I'm getting out of here. You spent all that money hiring them. You had people in those interviews that work at the company that spent that time. That all becomes waste at that point.
Yeah.
And that micromanager is going to do it again.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of waste, a lot of money and time that the organization is putting forth.
Let us talk about a probably not really popular topic within the trust topic, like what happens when you lose trust. Sometimes, unfortunately, it happens. You already mentioned a couple of stuff what can lead to losing trust. And I heard many times, actually, when a leader said something like, I lost my faith in that person, I lost my trust, so I fired that person. Or it happens in another way, obviously, when an employee loses trust in the organization or in the leader most of the time, and they just leave. What do you think, is there any way back when you lose trust as an employee, as a leader, to build that again? Or that's the general answer or the most effective answer when you lose trust, to leave?
Leaders are very, very busy people, very busy. And they're, imagine a leader with ropes tied around that person. Everyone's pulling a rope and the leader's like all over the place.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of leaders don't want to have to deal with things that are a rope that is really pulling hard on them. Okay. Right. Because they're not able to address all the other ropes. Mm-hmm. And let's say that's a employee who's performing not to expectation. Now, not all leaders, but some leaders will say, I don't have time to deal with this. I'm just going to get rid of the person. Yeah. And you might have a gold star employee who just needs a little more training, who just needs a little more empathy because there's things going on at home that are interfering in the workplace.
Yeah.
So leadership requires self-awareness. And am I living to my values? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to live to my values? There are leadership values. Look them up. Do I have these values? What do I need to do to change? Early in my career, I was about 24 years old and I was a manager. Mm-hmm. And I was not prepared at all. I was not given training. I was not, you're doing your job very well. We're going to make you a manager. And I fired someone without really understanding what she needed because my emotions were in the way.
Yeah.
My emotions were like, this is not acceptable. I shouldn't have to cover for her because she's late, on and on and on and on. She was a good employee, but she was late all the time. And instead of asking her, how can I support you and having empathy, what's going on in your life? I just wanted it over because that rope was pulling really hard and I couldn't get to the other ropes. And I regret that decision because she might have been a future leader of the company. She was a strong employee, but my emotions got in the way. So in that case, trust is diminished in the organization because everyone else is like, oh, I can't make a mistake or I can't have, I can't have this ongoing issue because I'm going to get fired. And some issues, like if you're getting a divorce and you're having to go to be out of the office, but you're not telling your manager that you're getting a divorce. So a lot of assumptions are made. Mm-hmm. So with me firing that's over, but it ripples down into the organization. Now, it's the same for an employee with the manager because the scenarios could be the same. So how do you build trust? You sit down and you talk. Mm-hmm. And you talk about, you get vulnerable. I got frustrated with you because you weren't meeting expectations. We sat down, we talked it through, and I still don't see that happening. And what I need from you is for you to step up and meet your expectations. And then for the employee to feel safe enough and to say to the employee, I want you to be able to tell me what you need to tell me without repercussion. I'm not going to come after you. I'm not going to talk about this behind your back. So the employee can feel safe because there's trust there. And it may be fleeting, but there's still trust in that moment to speak up about what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And then the leader can respond to that. Here's what I can do based on what you said, and here's what I can't do. And that is a conversation, a very critical conversation that is necessary for that employee to get better in the workplace and for the manager or the leader to get better as a leader.
What do you think when you can say to yourself as a leader that it's worth putting the effort into that type of conversation?
Right. And the reason the effort is in the long term is that employee might stay and be a great employee. So in the short term, I get rid of the frustration. I get rid of I don't have time for this. But then you've got to hire someone new. That takes time. You have to go through all the applicants' information. Then you have to train them. It takes 3 to 6 months to bring someone up to speed. So you've just lost 8 months.
Right.
Is it worth putting the effort into 2 or 3 months to help that employee grow and develop and be successful?
You mentioned emotions, and let me bring in a kind of approach, and I'm really interested in what you think about that. So let's say you have a kind of negative emotion toward a person, toward an employee or toward your leader, and it tells you that, okay, probably I don't want to be here anymore because of that emotion. According to some of the psychologists, they say that you are not really able to change your emotions, or not directly. So with the same person, you will have the same emotions, whatever you do. In the short run, most of the time it's really true. So my recommendation would be here to, when you said you sit down and talk, and I'm suggesting a topic for that type of conversations. The topic would be to know the other person better. Why I'm saying that? Because if you know more about the person, no matter it's a leader or an employee, for yourself, basically you change that person. You don't change the person directly, but you know more about the person. That's way you change that person for yourself. You know better that person, so your emotions probably will change because you know more that person. Probably it can happen that you will not like that person still, but you give you the chance to change the emotions this way. What do you think about this type of approach?
So I agree with you, Peter. We can't, emotions are challenging to change. It's just how we feel.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff that happened in our lives prior that brought us to these emotions. What we can change is how we respond to them. So typically the behavior chain, there's a psychological method of understanding this. So I have a feeling, and then I have a thought about that feeling. And then I have a feeling about that thought.
Right.
And then I have another thought. Okay. So it's this rapid, this is happening extremely fast. And all of a sudden we're angry or we're happy or we're disappointed or whatever we're feeling. But our thought then becomes, I don't like this. And then fear is introduced and we want to run away.
Right.
So I think we human beings, and this is true of all of us, check the facts. What's actually going on? Because we give meaning to so much based on all that's happened to us in that moment. And we have different filters of how we take in information. So you've met people who are super negative, right?
Yeah.
Their filters are negative. And then we've met people who are incredibly positive, incredibly enthusiastic about life, optimistic. They have a positive filter. And if we're making assumptions about other people or their behavior or what they're like at home, I mean, we go on and on with all the meaning we give different situations. And we don't check what really happened here. I'm going to be a scientist and just look at what's going on without judgment and then respond from that place our responses are completely different
Yeah.
and much more effective. Because then we can go back and say, when you said, when you said you don't like the way that I talk to my coworker, well, he's an idiot. That's putting meaning and making an assumption about that person.
Right.
And rather to say, you say that I don't get along with that person. What does that mean exactly? What does not get along with that person mean? So now we're introducing more data into the conversation so we can clearly understand one another. Because miscommunication really diminishes trust because we've got all these thoughts in our mind about what happened, and we're not really looking at what really happened here.
Yeah.
It's like that game Telephone. Do you play that in Hungary where you say to someone, the dog jumped over the tree or the limb on the ground, the trunk. And then someone says the dog tripped over the trunk. And then someone says something different.
Yes, we have the
and
same.
Then you get back to the start of the circle and it's like the clown was at the circus and he was hysterical. And you're like, what? How'd you get here? And that's what we do. We change the story to our benefit.
Yeah, probably we understand a little bit better what trust really means at the workplace. Can you give us a couple examples? What can be the difference? How a organization can be more successful with higher level of trust?
With higher levels of trust, there's a lot more openness. People feel comfortable bringing their true, authentic self to the workplace. And if they're not doing that, they're trying to behave like everyone else. And then you have what's called groupthink. Everyone is thinking the same way. Everyone is behaving the same way. And creativity cannot come out of that. So you're diminishing creativity. You're diminishing people's ability to be authentic. And then they might feel, you know what? I don't want to be here because I'm hiding parts of myself. I want to be able to bring my whole self to the workplace because I'm a great person and I have a lot of talents. The third thing is, with low levels of trust is people don't feel supported. And when I don't feel supported, I might make mistakes and then there are consequences to those mistakes. And I might say, well, I wasn't being supported, or I wasn't getting the learning that I needed, or I didn't have access to people. And then the person on the receiving end of that gets defensive. And then it just snowballs into a disagreement. It can. It doesn't always. And then when mistakes are made, are we using them as a learning opportunity, or are we using them to crush people?
Yeah, blaming others, yes.
Yeah. So, and then it has ripple effects because other people are experiencing this and they're thinking, am I next? So they're shutting down.
Right.
Now, is everyone shutting down? No. Some people are like, yeah, that happened, whatever, I'm going to move forward. But it can cause a diminishing of creativity, of communication, in decision-making. I'm going to argue with you because I don't like you and I don't like what you're bringing to the table, rather than collaboration, rather than trying to understand what people are saying, rather than digging my heels in because I just don't agree with you. So yeah, it has dire consequences, and share owners and stakeholders aren't getting the best that they could get. And that's what a leader is for, is to get the best out of people that report to them.
Sometimes I see that leaders have a really strong attitude toward find the person who caused the problem. And they are not really going to find out what really happened, but they try to blame someone because it's easier for them. And it looks like for them that it takes too much time to find out what really happened, and I just want to see the person and handle the issue directly with the person who effectively caused the problem. What type of approach would you recommend for a leader to overcome with that feeling that you want to blame someone?
And like you said, blame is a quick answer.
Yeah.
Right. And we can get to what's wrong because we're going to scapegoat someone. We're going to put the blame on them, and then we can then deal with that one person or that team. And I mentioned this earlier, managers or leaders really need to be self-aware. Like, how am I contributing to what's going on in this organization? And I learned once that if a manager walks in the morning and is disgruntled, like just doesn't look happy, everyone on that team, and it gets around very quickly, he's not in a good mood. She's not in a good mood. She's on the warpath. He's doing this. We got to watch out. You know what I mean? All this stuff comes into play. So as a leader, and I'm not a perfect leader, and I'm not trying to come across that I am, but as a leader, I'm very aware of what my behaviors are telling people, and when I speak, how that's going to be heard, and how can that be misunderstood. So when I speak as a leader, I pause and think about, how do I want to respond? And then, is this going to get me to my goal with this team, or is it going to move me away from that goal?
Right.
And that's self-awareness. What are my traits that are powerful and those that aren't getting me to my goal? And which ones am I going to choose? Which ones am I going to use today? And it may be appropriate to use communication that's not going to get me to my goal right now, and that's okay. But if I'm constantly choosing to communicate in a way that's not going to get me, my career and my team, in a certain direction to achieve a goal, that's not healthy. That's not helping anyone.
Right.
And in that fear of, I may get in trouble, let's go blame someone else, rather than saying, I made a mistake here, and I'm going to be transparent and I'm going to own it, because that earns respect and trust.
Yes, it's a really experienced leader who can behave like that. I would say that. But sometimes as a leader, we also have feelings, obviously, and emotions.
We do.
And I find it a really delicate balance how to express our emotions and feelings, and how to still control ourselves. Because if I understand correctly, as a leader, you shouldn't say that I don't have feelings, that I don't have emotions, because I'm always really strict and organized. Probably it can build trust if I able to express my emotions. So how do you find the balance between expressing emotions and show that you are a person and you have feelings, but at the same time not to push them or hurt anyone around you?
That's a really great question, Peter. How much do I disclose? If I disclose too much, are they going to use that against me or the company? And I think being honest with our feelings, and people who say, don't bring your feelings into the office, that's just not possible. We're not machines. We can't flick a switch. So what is the balance? The balance is, I'm annoyed because we talked about doing XYZ and you did ABC, and that's not the message we wanted to convey. And now we're going to have to do some cleaning up of the message that you delivered. And I know that you have it within you to help me get this back on track. Do you believe we went off track, or why did you say ABC when we agreed to XYZ? Did you get new information? Did you talk to someone that shifted? Like, what's going on there? Rather than assume that whatever you assume, whatever meaning you give it, And, really having that conversation around what shifted and why. And were we clear that we were going to move in this direction? Was our agreement clear? Do we need to work on how we make agreements and how we agree with one another? Do we need to confirm, okay, so what we're saying is we're going to do X, Y, Z. And, it's the process that we use in communication. Are we being clear? Are we saying like when we're talking about how we're going to deliver information, do we say like, okay, we've got it. We're on the same page. But do we review the things that we agreed to at the end of the meeting so that we're both confident that we are in fact on the same page? Right. Okay. And as the leader, I have to take the lead on doing that. Right. Because I'm trying to build the trust.
Yeah.
And other people will build trust when they see me building trust with me and with other people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the balance is to acknowledge the feeling, but then move on to what's the solution.
Let me bring in a little slightly different perspective, or probably just add something. Like it's another reason to be able to show feelings and emotions as a leader. I think it's important to be able to do that, obviously in an appropriate way. If you show that as a leader you have feelings and emotions, it gives the opportunity for your employees to do the same, to express their feelings and emotions. And why is it important? According to my understanding, as you just said, a leader has a lot of duty and stuff to do, and they try to reduce the time, whatever you need to do. So they need to they try to be really effective, and it's really effective to know your employees based on their emotions. It gives you a really strong idea and knowledge how they feel, how they do what they do at the company or in the organization. So that's why it can be really important to a leader to be able to see the emotions and feelings of an employee, because it gives a good opportunity, a good sign whether they are doing great or they okay with the organization or not. And as you just said, employees have followed the leaders. This is how we work, humans. If we have a leader, we tend to follow the leader. And in also from this perspective, if the leader is able to express feelings, emotions in appropriate way, then the employee will do the same. And it's really great for the leader because it's a good source of information. What do you think about this process?
Right. I think that you nailed it on the head. It's reciprocation. I will reciprocate if I feel safe.
Right.
But if a leader is not sharing their feelings or being honest about what's going on with them, if they're not saying things like, I was annoyed, or I was really excited when you did this, or I'm feeling sad today because, our dog died and our children are really taking it hard. And doing the same and listening, really listening, actively listening when people talk, and hearing what they're saying in between the lines, the things they're not saying, but you're hearing or you're feeling about them. That is a very true statement. When we know people better than just at a superficial level, we care about them. We care about them and we want the best for them. Right. So yes, sharing feelings allows us to get there. If the leader is giving the example that it's safe to share this here, I'm going to feel that it's safe.
Right. So
I'm going to share what's going on with me. And it's important not to have it be this, long therapy session because we're not therapists. But to say, okay, where do we go from here? And I used to say to people, you have 5 minutes to complain, and then we're going to spend 20 minutes on the solution. Okay. And don't come to me and complain unless you have a recommendation. Right. Okay. It's okay to share feelings. It's okay to get it out. You can vent. But as a leader, we want to move to solution. We want to move to how do we change this? How do we make this better?
You mentioned a couple of times self-awareness. I'm really a huge fan of self-awareness. What's the best, or what's your recommendation around that? How can a leader build up that self-awareness?
That's a great question. And it's something that we often don't talk about with leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Self-awareness is key to any interaction, whether it's in the workplace, at home, with friends, it doesn't matter. So let's give an example. I'm going to just talk about it as if this is me.
Mm-hmm.
I get defensive as a leader, not really, but I get defensive as a leader when someone points out something that I did wrong. So if I know that, I can say to someone, I hear you, and let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back to this. And I go to the restroom, I splash some cold water on my face, and I say, my initial response when this happens is to lash out and defend myself. And I'm not going to do that. And I think, how am I going to do this with this person? How am I going to respond in a way, again, that gets us to our goal?
Mm-hmm.
And it's only through that self-awareness that I know that about myself, and I can change my course. I can course correct. Okay. Because I miss the mark. If I just lash out, I'm missing the mark.
Mm-hmm.
So having that self-awareness, and there's so many ways you can gain that self-awareness. There's books, there's talking to other people. You can go see a therapist. You can be engaged in a group forum that talks about those things on a weekly basis. But it's not, I read a book once. It's, I read a book and I talk to other people and I gain all this information, and how do I implement it? And it's taking risks in the workplace to try on new behaviors.
Right.
And then saying, how did that work out? Did I move closer to the goal, or did I move away from it? How do I now adjust? Okay. So self-awareness is a process. And I think that example that I provided is a good one, because we just react like that without sometimes even thinking about it. So sitting down prior and thinking things through is so important, because if we're just reacting, that can diminish trust. That can destroy trust in one comment, in one reaction. So doing the work ahead of time, so that when I get into those situations, I can respond in a way that is not going to tear down this person, that's going to build them up, be respectful, be empathetic, and that's going to help me. I'm going to be happier about my behavior, and like, whoa, I did that well. You know what I mean? And then that enables me, gives me the motivation to do it more and more.
What do you think, what can be in the way for a leader to work on self-awareness?
I'm very research focused. So I like to have data when I'm considering how to do something. I don't just base it on how I'm feeling or logic or whatever. But I think what gets in the way is ego. We work hard to get to the level we got to.
Right.
People just need to do what I say. I had to work my way up. They need to do it. And ego is good because it protects us.
Right.
But when it's protecting us at the expense of other people, or the expense of our goals, or the expense of stakeholders, if my staff is walking out the door because they can't stand me, I have to really look at myself and my ego and say, is my ego helping me right now? And if it's not, what do I do about it?
I experienced the same. It happened to me, obviously, also at the beginning when I started to play leadership roles. Like, if I'm questioning myself, then who I am, really. So, and it works another way around, actually. For me, this is what happened to me. So when I felt that I keep myself strong enough, if I don't change, if I keep how I want to do stuff and don't ask questions, this is how I felt strong enough. And I had to learn that probably it's not the best way. Probably I can ask myself, this is really what I really want to do? Is there any other way to do that? And find out my real goals and values. Do I act according to my values really or not? Or I just want to make something simple? Or I just want to show power? Because this is what I feel it's appropriate and gets me to the goal I want to get. And I had to learn that probably not. Probably it's better to stop for a while and ask questions and look around me, how people feel around me, how they responding to my acts, and then ask questions to myself, what I really want to do, where I want to go, and understand my motivations, what really motivates me in a certain position, why I want to be a leader at all, or what made me a leader. How did it happen? To be honest, sometimes it happened to me that I didn't really want it to be a leader, but I became a leader in some ways. And I just found myself, I'm doing it again. I'm a leader again. And I had to learn in a kind of hard way that if I understand myself a little bit better, and if I have the courage to show it and act accordingly, it makes me more stronger and more successful than just to keep whatever I thought it's a effective leader behavior. So what was your process in your leadership roles to find out how awareness is important to you?
When I was a young leader starting off, I used power as, look at me. I'm this young guy and I'm already a manager. I'm a manager at 24 years old. I mean, who does that in a big company? And what I learned through self-awareness was power is not to be hoarded over other people.
Right.
It's to be used to bring out the best in other people. It's to be used to lift people up. It's to be used to really establish a culture that allows people to bring their authentic self to the workplace. And that excites me. That excites me. And I got that through self-awareness. And how did I do that? I learned, I talked to people. I'll admit it, I went to therapy because I wanted to be the best version of myself. And I did a lot of other things. And one of the most important thing was talking to people that I saw that characteristic, that ability to lift people up and help unlock what people have to offer. Yeah. And I would experiment with that. And I did that. When I was in graduate school, I experimented with most everything that I was learning. And then I got real-time information that said, whoa, this works. So then I would try it more. Like, how can I tweak that? And a lot of people won't do that because for whatever reason. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how I'm built. I want to be the best that I can be, and I want to unlock the potential of other people. That excites me. I'm passionate about that. Yeah. So what's the easier way of doing that? Know what your triggers are. You know, if someone says something or does something, how do you respond to that? But in a way that's just like, it's immediate and I'm just reacting. And then how can you change that? What would the opposite of that be? Like if I get angry or I shut down, how can I be curious? How can I be engaging? If I yell, how can I talk in a way that's inviting and building trust so that the person can respond? The person can share what's going on for them honestly without fear of getting in trouble. So I would say make a list of 5 of your triggers and then work on those triggers. That's your goal for the year.
It's a great advice. Is there any other topic you would like to cover?
I can't stress enough about support and accountability. Again, if I'm not being accountable, no one else is going to be accountable. And I've been in situations where a manager has said, I don't know why you're all doing this. Da, da, da. And one person had the courage to say, because you do it. And what that person was doing was shutting the manager down. Like, you expect us to behave in a certain way, but you're not behaving that way. And then that just creates its own bag of, sack of conflicts, that no one wants to be in that situation because it's so uncomfortable. So, accountability is huge when you're trying to build trust. And then support is, when people feel cared for and they feel encouraged, that's where the magic happens, because they can bring themselves, they can bring all of themselves, and maybe not all of themselves, but they can bring much more than they're currently bringing.
Right.
And the magic in that is when everyone is bringing their gifts to the table, ideas flourish from that. Right. Ideas that wouldn't have been capable before because people were afraid. I can't say that. How are people going to think of me? I can't be bold because I'll get in trouble. So that magic is like a geyser. What are those things? The water just shoots out of the ground. Right. And it brings with it so much stuff that can make the company better, that can make products better, we can communicate with our customers in a different way. It creates curiosity and creativity and builds relationships. And that's what we want. We want the best out of people so that we can be the best company. And then we have customers that love us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Peter.
It was a really great talk, and we can discuss whatever you want. Is there anything else you want to put in or you want to talk about?
I don't have anything else. I just want to thank you for inviting me to join you today. It's been great. You and I are colleagues. We know each other. I think highly of you, and I believe you do the same with me.
Right.
And I think this topic is really important for people, for both sides, for leaders and employees that report to them. And I think we covered a lot of aspects of leadership that contribute to trust, and then employees who can reciprocate and learn from a leader's behavior. Like, I really respect my leader. I'm gonna find out how I can be like that. So it's such a critical topic, and I don't think it gets enough attention. So thanks for inviting me here so that we could have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. But I still have one more question.
Sure.
Actually, two. So the first is, I know it's not really easy question, but how would you summarize? What would be the key takeaway from this talk?
Trust is critical to a healthy organization. And it's the leader's responsibility to know where it stands, to try to improve it, and maintain that. Because, it can be diminished so quickly by a single comment or a single behavior. And we talked about the consequences of low or diminished trust in the workplace. So I would say knowing where trust is and how am I contributing to trust in the organization? And am I diminishing it? And if so, what can I do to grow it?
Thank you very much.
So what's your second question?
Yeah, my second question, it's a much easier one, obviously. So if someone feels you want to talk to you about leadership and other topics, how can they reach you?
They can reach me on my email address, which is james@jameslampasonacoaching.com. And or they can you know what? I just got a new phone number and I can't remember it.
We can put it in the description of the podcast.
Okay, that would be great. You can put that in there, and they can email me as best, and then we can talk about that.
Thank you very much. It was a really great talk. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation. And hopefully you can follow this conversation with other topics. Let me know if you have any ideas you want to talk about.
Thank you. I'll do that. Thank you, Peter. It was a privilege being here. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the podcast today. It was about leadership trust. We covered how leadership trust can contribute to the success of an organization. If you still have questions, put those into the comment section or contact directly me or James. Thank you.